The Storyteller's Daughter, read for you by the author, Camille Gossett. Prologue. Once upon a time, there was a little girl who lived in a small town where strange things happened, and nothing is as it seems. The little girl had two parents for a little while, but then her mother became very sick. Her mom was once beautiful with long, flowing blonde locks of wavy hair, thicker than a horse's tail, and voluptuous curves that rounded out her pale and pristine features. In her illness, her body had faded, and she had lost so much weight that she appeared to be a skeleton of the person she once was. Her once elegant hands appeared ghost-like and gaunt, harsh and frightening with their bony knuckles and almost see-through thinness. Her mother's once lively hair hung limp, shorn to her shoulders and dirty, a mousy brown overtaking what used to look like Rapunzel's golden silk. Her magnificent emerald green eyes faded to a murky gray, and her bosom shrunk to resemble the chest of a 12-year-old boy. When the little girl's mother became ill, she did not improve. It didn't matter what doctors she went to see or that came to her bedside. The girl's mother stayed up all night, speaking to voices that no one else saw, muttering to herself about phrases no one knew or could understand. She looked troubled all the time, pulling at her hair and picking invisible welts and blemishes on her skin. The girl's mother's eyes formed large purple and black-looking bruises underneath them, and they became dull and haunted-looking. It was as though the woman had seen something too awful for words or for this world, something so horrific it had broken her brain and muted her for her remaining time on this plane. The girl's mother retreated further yet into her illness. The woman began to write furiously, sometimes during her all-night adventures of sleeplessness and insomnia, sometimes half awake, almost in what appeared to be a trance-like state, jotting down words and sentences no one could make out in her bed. Sometimes things happened around the woman that no one could explain. For instance, doctors had become wary of treating her or even being around her after the last unexplainable event. The girl's mother had been lying in her sickbed, unable to move or even garner enough strength to feed herself a spoonful of steaming bone broth. The treating physician at the time had been an esteemed specialist in incurable and unidentifiable diseases and was at the woman's home as a favor to her husband, whom he knew from their other business deals together. The doctor really did not want to be there. He thought the woman was mad, not sick, and that she needed a head doctor and maybe to be locked up in a loony bin for a season or two. He was irritated that his day hadn't gone according to plan, and a patient had complained about his lateness. Yet here he was after hours trying to help a crazy person, all out of the kindness of his heart. The doctor's ill temper showed. His breaths were short and crisp, his movements fast and careless, and there was a general nastiness about him that night. No one was supervising the doctor and the girl's mother. The girl's father was with the little girl trying to serve her supper and comfort her as best he knew how. Men weren't always the keenest in the areas of nurture and sweet nothings. It was hard for the man being the only parent for his daughter while his wife suffered whatever condition she had. The girl's father worked hard, had always done what he thought he was supposed to do, and had married the woman when she became pregnant not too long into their courtship. Thinking about it now, as he wiped some juice from his darling daughter's chin, he realized how little he knew about his wife. He had met her in a pub, which was not what he liked to admit to others, and certainly not anything he would ever tell his parents. But she had been there after work one day, and he had been drawn to her beauty and vivaciousness almost as though a love spell had been cast over him. He remembered walking across the bar to approach her, practically stumbling on his metal-toed work boots, hoping she wouldn't embarrass him too publicly. She was laughing at something when he got close enough to speak to her, and he recalled the way she tilted her head back in glee, allowing herself the full gamut of the joy she was experiencing and ensuring everyone else knew what a good time she was having. She was electric, on fire with her aliveness, and the man knew he had to have her. It was a fast, rushed courtship consisting primarily of hot and steamy encounters and having sex in places he didn't know grown-ups made love. On trees in the forest, grassy patches in the woods clearing, bookstore bathrooms, a desk in his office building, the public library, and many other arousing locations. And then the woman became pregnant. Not knowing what else to do and having been raised to marry a woman and raise a family, the man proposed. The two wed in a civil ceremony at the courthouse a month later with no visitors in attendance. The man's parents had disowned him for marrying and impregnating this woman. She was nothing more than a common whore, the man's mother had said. The man had always been an upstanding person, the perfect son and friend, yet in this moment, all he cared for was his blonde bride. It didn't matter to him he had known his family his whole life and that they had always prioritized one another over anything else life threw their way. Now here he was, caring for a daughter he loved with all his might and knowing nothing about the woman in the back bedroom of his home, other than he didn't think she was who he thought she was. The man's thoughts were disrupted when he heard a shrieking arise from the back bedroom. He jolted upward from the dinner table, and his little girl squawked out, "Father, what is it? Is Mommy okay?" Without responding to his daughter, the man rushed toward the room, intent on finding out what was causing the commotion. As he made his way down the hallway that led to the room, he was accosted by a furious doctor storming out of the room that contained his wife. The doctor saw him and looked at his face, causing a look of alarm to break out over the man's countenance. The doctor's face was covered in burning, fiery red boils, some already oozing with pus that had burst out of them. Somehow, yet more boils were sprouting up in the mere seconds the two men had been looking at each other. As if shocked by an invisible cattle prod, the doctor shrieked, bringing his hands up to his face in pain, as right on cue, another boil spurted open, exploding blood and viscous yellow liquid everywhere. It was repulsive to watch, and the man was sure it was unbearable to experience. He felt terrible for the doctor and knew in an instant there was no use in trying to entertain any sort of further conversation with the man. He just had to let him go. And then he would have to follow in the doctor's footsteps and check on the patient that was in the room. The patient that was the woman that was his wife that he knew nothing about, yet had terrible growing suspicions regarding. The doctor never came back to the man's house, and in no time at all, his story of what the sick witch had done to him had spread to anyone within traveling distance to where the man and the woman lived. The man didn't know if his wife was a witch, but he knew better than anyone why the townsfolk would say this. He hadn't been in the room with his wife or the doctor, but he knew that sometimes strange things happened around his wife, strange things that didn't have any logical explanation at all. The little girl's mom died soon after the incident with the doctor. No one from near or far would come to treat or help the woman in any way. And in all reality, it wouldn't have helped the woman anyway. Death had come for her and taken her in his embrace on his own timeline. There was nothing anyone could do to stop it. The little girl felt bad that deep down she was thankful her mother had passed. It wasn't that she didn't love her mother. She did very much, and she would miss her terribly. But it was too painful and awful to live in a house with a dying person. The misery of the dying was contagious, and everything about the place was contaminated by grief and illness. The little girl's father changed when his wife died. It was like all the joy in his body had been sucked dry and died with his beloved. He went from open and buoyant, full of life, patience, and perseverance, to drunk, avoidant, bitter, and short tempered. Instead of talking to his daughter and teaching her things about cooking, the world around them, and the men in it, the father began to spend more time alone and was mean and abrupt if interrupted. Family dinners became a thing of the past. Dust collected on the surfaces of the house, and the girl felt the ending of what once was a life shared among them all. The little girl felt like she had lost both of her parents. Her father was not a parent any longer, choosing to drown in his own sorrows and leave her to fend for herself. She was a smart girl, and while she had figured out how to prepare basic meals like eggs with cheese and cheese noodles with chicken, and to work the washer machine and dryer, get to the bus stop on time, and order the groceries through a service with her father's payment card, she knew she could not go on like this. If being around her sick and dying mother had been impossible, being around this ghost-like bad father version of her father was the ninth circle of hell. She simply could not endure any more pain and suffering. Taking out her mother's old address book, she found the address for her mom's sister, her Aunt Elizabeth. The little girl recalled that Aunt Elizabeth lived in a town called Stonegate, somewhere about 8 hours from where she lived. Aunt Elizabeth had two children, also little girls, but the girl didn't remember their names. She didn't know Aunt Elizabeth well, but she had heard her mother talk often about how she ate dessert first and danced naked under the full moon, chanting phrases nobody else understood to the heavens. The little girl wasn't sure how she felt about things like that, but she knew it had to be better than staying here while her father ran out of money, forgot to pay their bills or speak to her, and drank himself into liver failure. She wasn't going to do that. The little girl thought she would send a letter to Aunt Elizabeth explaining the situation and then begging for her to take her in. But then the little girl remembered something her mother had taught her. Her mom had told her that when she was a little girl and they skipped school together to go for long walks and drives, talking in circles about the minutiae of their days and the meaning of life, that it was better to ask for forgiveness and permission. The little girl decided to follow this advice, so she looked up train routes next. After not too long, the little girl figured out a plan. She found a train station that was located within a cab's ride from her home and could take her all the way to Stonegate. The fare wasn't too high, and she checked to make sure there was enough cash in her father's bedside table to cover the costs and a tip. Her mom had also taught her to always tip people. It was important to show gratitude for those that help us get where we are going, she would say. The little girl then found a plaid suitcase with wheels that looked in good condition under her mom's bed. She packed the suitcase with her favorite two books, A Wrinkle in Time and Little House on the Prairie, her stuffed dog named Tracker, several pairs of jeans, sweatpants, fresh underwear, bralettes, sweatshirts, and a backup pair of sneakers. She put face wash, soap, a toothbrush, hairbrush, toothpaste, and deodorant in a plastic bag and tucked those in her suitcase. Then she emptied out the drawer next to her father's bed. There was $570.75. The little girl carefully tucked the cash in a little pouch she had found in her mom's bathroom and put it inside the bottom of her black boots. With a deep sigh and not a single look behind her, refusing to turn around and take in any more of the place that was her childhood home and everything she knew, she called the cab service number, gave them her address, and went to the street to wait for the rest of her life to begin. The little girl who took the cab and train to Stonegate had been named after her mother. Maybe that was one of the reasons her father came to despise her so much after her mother died. Since the little girl's mother had died, the very sight of the man's daughter made his upper lip curl and caused him to guzzle his liquor even faster. The little girl and her mother were named Eleanor. Little Eleanor was my grandmother, Big Ma's mother. She made her way all the way to Elizabeth Indigo's home in Stonegate Nexus by herself at 11 years old. When she arrived at the home, she was struck by how the grand estate was dark, ominous, and regal. Gothic Victorian with shingles and columns and all, yet inviting. It seemed like there were answers within those walls, and Eleanor wanted to know all of those answers.